Hello friends, in this video we shall learn about evolution and perfection. Okay, so let's start. Duplex was probably the first to provide European soldier on rent to Indian ruler to fight wars, and since then Clive and almost all the subsequent British Governor General continued this system. The first Indian state to fall into this protection trap was Awadh, and which was signed this treaty in 1765 under the company pledged to defend the border of Awadh on the condition that Nawab would bear the cost of such defense. In 1787, the companies first insisted that the tributary states should not have foreign relation as reflected in the treaty between the Cornwallis and the Nawab of the Carnatic in February 1787. So understand some points over here, that the French and the British involvement. The French, led by the Duplex, were among the first to rent European. So this trend was not new. It was French who had rented European soldiers to Indian ruler. Later, the British under Clive and subsequent governor generals continued this practice. Now, about Awadh's protection treaty that was signed in the year 1765, the first Indian state to fall into this system was Awadh, and it had signed a treaty in 1765. The British pledged to protect Awadh border, but the Nawab had to bear the defense cost. And restriction on the foreign relations in the 1787. So it was like that by 1787, the British began restricting the foreign policies of Indian states. The Treaty of 1787 between Cornwallis and the Nawab of Carnatic reflected this, preventing tributary states from forming independent foreign relations. So this was the method of controlling the Indian states, later evolved into subsidiary alliance and was formalized by Lord Wellesley in 1790s later on, and this was the thing happened. So this was all about evolution and perfection. Next is the stages of the application of subsidiary alliance. Stages of the application of subsidiary alliance. There were 4 stages in the development of the subsidiary alliance. And in the first phase, the company offered to help a friendly Indian state fight any war with his troops. The second phase involved the military assistance to the Indian states under the pretext of friendship by creating a common cause with the Indian state. And in the third phase, the money was sought from the Indian partner. In return, the company promised to provide contingent of troops to the Indian ruler for his personal security as well as to keep out the raiders. And in the fourth or the final stage, the money or protection fee was usually fixed at a high level, and if it was not paid on time, the Indian state was asked to cede part of its territories to the company. The company's entry into the state affairs had begun. The states which accepted the alliance, the Indian ruler who accepted the subsidiary system were Nizam of Hyderabad, September 1798 and 1800, ruler of the Mysore in 1799, ruler of Tanjore, Nawab of Awadh, Peshwa, Bhosle, Raja of Berar, Sindhyas in 1804, Rajput states of Jodhpur, Jaipur, Bundi, and the ruler of the Bharatpur. So we have understood that what is a subsidiary alliance. It was a policy used by the British East India Company to control the Indian states, and the Indian ruler had to accept the British troops in their state, and they are paying for them. And if they fail to pay this Indian ruler, they had to give the part of their land to the British. So this was all about subsidiary alliance. Then the stages of the subsidiary alliance were, first was the military help. First stage was the military help. The British offered to help the Indian ruler in war. They provided British troops to support the ruler. The second stage was the friendship and control. The British created a friendship with the Indian ruler. They made a ruler depend on them for military help. So second was friendship and control. The third was demanding for the money. So British started asking for money in return for providing their troops. And these troops were used for the ruler's security and to protect the ruler's kingdom. The fourth stage was the high payment or loss of land. The British increased the protection fee to a very high amount. If the ruler could not pay, he had to give land to the British. And this allowed the British to interfere in the state's affairs. So the fourth stage was high payments or loss of the land. Either the ruler had to pay or for the British troops, or they had to cede or give their lands to the British. Now, the Indian rulers who had accepted this subsidiary alliance were the Nizam of Hyderabad in 1798 and 1800, ruler of Mysore in 1799, ruler of Kanjor, ruler of Awadh, Maratha Empire, Peshwa, Bhosle of Maratha Empire, then Sindhia, Rajput states of Jodhpur, Jaipur, Masheri, Bundi, and the ruler of Bharatpur in 1818. And Holkar was the last Maratha confederacy to accept the subsidiary alliance in 1818. So this is all about the state that had accepted the subsidiary alliance. The next topic is the Doctrine of Lapse. In simple terms, this doctrine stated that the adopted son could be the heir to his foster father's private property, but not the state. The British had the supreme power to decide whether the state should be handed over to the adopted son or annexed. So, under this Doctrine of Lapse, it was a policy used by the British East India Company to take control over the Indian state. It stated that if a ruler died without having a biological son, his adopted son could not inherit personal property but not the kingdom. It was like the biological son is not there if for some ruler, then the adopted son may get their personal property, but they cannot be the ruler of the kingdom, the next ruler of the kingdom. They can't be the next ruler of the kingdom. The British had the final decision on whether to allow the adopted son to rule or to take over the state. So the policy was introduced by Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General of India, from 1848 to 1856. And the state that were annexed under this Doctrine of Lapse without any war was Satara, Sambalpur, then Jhansi, Nagpur, and Awadh. So these all states were annexed under the Doctrine of Lapse policy. And the impact of this Doctrine of Lapse over the Indian ruler was like many Indian rulers lost their kingdoms. It created anger and resentment among the Indian ruler and their people. It was one of the causes of the revolt of 1857. Okay. So these all are the things. Then this principle was said to be based on the Hindu law and Indian customs, but Hindu law seemed to be somewhat inconclusive. The Indian sovereign taking over the kingdom of his vassal with no apparent heir were rare. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had annexed a few of his feudatory principalities on account of lapse. Likewise, the company in 1828 acquired a few petty CIS settler states on the absence of heirs. Nevertheless, there was no clear example of an adopted son being deprived of the entire state, of such a state being considered as a lapse. Although the credit for this policy is given to Lord Dalhousie from 1848 to 56, he was not its originator. It was a coincidence that during his tenure as Governor General, many important cases came to light in which the principle could be implemented. So the policy used by the British to take over the Indian state, and this policy stated that an adopted son could inherit the personal property but cannot acquire the kingdom. The British had the power to decide whether the state would go to the adopted son or be annexed. The British claimed it was based on Hindu law and Indian customs. However, Hindu law was not clear on this matter, and in reality, Hindu rulers often allowed adopted sons to inherit the throne. So, during Lord Dalhousie's rule in 1848 to 56, many cases arose where this policy could be used. So this allowed the British to annex several Indian states without conducting any war. Satara, Sambalpur, Jhansi, Nagpur, Awadh are the examples of the state that had been annexed under the Doctrine of Lapse policy. Now, what was the impact of this policy? Many Indian rulers lost their kingdom in an unfair way. It has increased anger towards the British rule, and all these things we have discussed. Now, the next is, it was a matter of coincidence that during the tenure of the Dalhousie, the rulers of many states died without any male child, and 7 states were annexed under this Doctrine of Lapse. Satara, Jhansi, Nagpur and other small states including Jaitpur of Bundelkhand, Sambalpur from Odisha and Bhagat from the Madhya Pradesh. Lord Dalhousie annexed Awadh in 1856 after deposing Nawab Wajid Ali Shah on the ground of misgovernment. The Dalhousie annexed 8 states during his 8-year tenure as Governor General from 1848 to 56, and his reign almost completed the process of expansion of British power in India, which began with the victory over Siraj-ud-Dawla at Palasi in 1757. Now, if the question comes like, Doctrine of Lapse had historical precedence, explain. So, under this we have to remember Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So, Maharaja Ranjit Singh annexed some small princely state. This small princely state also termed as feudatory principalities when their ruler died without a biological heir. This was similar to the Doctrine of Lapse, but was used on a smaller scale. This was used by Maharaja Ranjit Singh on a smaller scale. And even before Dalhousie, the British East India Company in 1820 took over some CIS Satluj states, small states near the Satluj River, termed as CIS Satluj states, when their ruler had no heirs. So it had been repeated in the past during 1820. However, these were minor acquisitions, not major kingdom takeovers. But Dalhousie's principle was a major Indian takeover, because before Dalhousie there were no clear case where an adopted son was denied the right to inherit the entire kingdom. The idea of considering a kingdom as a lapsed due to no direct heir was mostly developed and used aggressively during Dalhousie's rule in 8 years. Some may argue that it was a coincidence that many rulers died without heirs during Dalhousie's tenure. However, Dalhousie was determined to expand British rule and use the doctrine of lapse strictly. He annexed 8 states using both these policies and excuse of misgovernment as well. Like Awadh in 1856 was annexed in respect of misgovernment by Dalhousie. So these all are the things. We also remember that Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi strongly opposed this, leading to her role in the revolt of 1857. So this policy contributed to growing resistance against the British rule. Okay. And the impact of Dalhousie's annexation resulted in annexation of 8 states under his 8-year rule, like Satara, Sambalpur, Jhansi, Nagpur, Jaipur, Bhagat of Madhya Pradesh and other small states, and Awadh due to misgovernment. Okay. And this led to the expansion of the British control over India significantly. His policies increased resentment, leading to the revolt of 1857, and this completed a century of British expansion, which began with the Battle of Plassey in 1757 with the victory over Siraj-ud-Daulah. So all these things we have discussed. The next topic is annexation of Awadh. Annexation of Awadh. Awadh was the oldest of the state brought under the subsidiary alliance and continued to be misruled under spendthrift Nawabs for a long period of time, about 80 years. The people suffered from heavy taxes imposed by the Nawab as well as illegal collections by his officials and talukdars. The long-term bankruptcy of treasury was partly due to the heavy fees charged by the British government for the maintenance of the subsidiary troops. In 1819, Nawab was given the title and status of a king. Lord Dalhousie instructed Sleeman, the resident of Awadh, to tour the entire state and find out the real situation. The resident submitted a report describing the chaotic state of the state, and Dalhousie was not in favor of the annexation, but the Court of Directors ordered the annexation and abolition of the Thorn during 1856. Wajid Ali Shah was deposed from the Thorn and exiled to Calcutta, and this was the political mistake for which the British had to pay heavy price during the revolt of 1857. So it was like Awadh was one of the oldest Indian state under the British control. It was brought under the subsidiary alliance, an agreement with the British in 1801. The Nawab of Awadh ruled for a long time. By the time of British control, the Nawab was Wajid Ali Shah. The Nawab spent too much money and was not a very good ruler. Heavy taxes were imposed on the people, and British officials and the local landlord or talukdar collected extra money illegally. The British charged high fees for keeping their army in Awadh. Since 1819, the Nawab of Awadh had to pay a lot of money to the British to maintain the British troops. Now there is a question that did Dalhousie want to annex Awadh? So answer to this question is no. Lord Dalhousie did not want to annex Awadh. But the British Court of Directors, the British government leaders ordered him to annex Awadh. So in 1856, the British removed this Wajid Ali Shah from the throne, and Wajid Ali Shah was sent to live in Calcutta in exile. So exile means forcing someone to leave their home or country and live somewhere else as a punishment. So Nawab Wajid Ali Shah was exiled to Calcutta in 1856, and he was forced to leave Awadh and was forced to live in another city, that is Calcutta. But this action of Britishers was considered as a mistake, because the people of Awadh were angry at the British for removing their ruler, and this was one of the reasons why Awadh played a major role in the revolt of 1857 against the British. So British had to pay a lot for this, for the removal of the Awadh's ruler. So the moral of this Awadh story is that the British thought they were being very smart, but their action made the people of India angry, and the annexation of Awadh was a big reason why Indians fought back in revolt of 1857. Okay. Now the next topic is relationships of British India with their neighboring countries. First is Anglo Bhutanese relations. The occupation of Assam in 1826 brought the British in close contact with state of Bhutan. As a result of continuous attacks by the Bhutanese in the neighboring areas of Assam and Bengal, as well as poor treatment meted out to Elgin's envoy in 1863 to 1864, and the treaty imposed on them, the British were forced to annex these passes, and allowances given to the Bhutanese was stopped. And in 1865, Bhutanese were forced to surrender the passes that led to Assam in return for an annual subsidy. This was the surrendered district, which became a productive area with tea garden. So the question is, how did the British and Bhutan come in contact? In 1826, the British took control of Assam after defeating the Burmese. This brought them close to Bhutan, which was Assam's neighbor. And Bhutanese raiders often attacked British territories in Assam and Bengal. The British were also unhappy with the harsh treatment of British officials by Bhutan. So in 1863-64, Bhutan treated British envoys Elgin and Ashley Eden badly. This angered the British, leading to the military action. The British stopped giving the subsidies, that is the financial help, to Bhutan, and they took control of important mountain passes used to enter Assam. So in 1865, Bhutan had to surrender and signed a treaty. They gave up the passes leading to Assam in exchange for an annual payment from the British. And the passes connected Assam with Bhutan and were valuable for trade and security. So the British developed these regions into productive land with tea gardens. Anglo Nepalese relations. In 1760, the Gorkhas seized control over Nepal from the heirs of Ranjit Malla of Bhadgaon. They found it easy to extend their dominion southward as the north was well defended by the Chinese. In 1801, the English annexed Gorakhpur, which brought the Gorkhas' boundary and the company's boundary together. The conflict began during the reign of Lord Hastings in 1813 to 23 due to the capture of Batwal and Swaraj by Gorkhas. The war ended with the Treaty of Sugauli in 1816, which was in favor of the British. So according to this treaty, Nepal accepted a British resident. Nepal handed over the district of Garhwal and Kumaon and gave up claim on Terai. Nepal also withdrew from Sikkim, and the British got many benefits from this agreement. The British Empire now reached the Himalayas. They got better facilities for trade with Central Asia, and it acquired sites for hill stations such as Shimla, Mussoorie, Nainital, and Gurkhas joined British Indian Army on large scale. So what happened? In 1760, the Gorkhas, a powerful warrior group, seized control of Nepal. They defeated the heir of the Ranjit Malla of Bhadgaon and expanded their kingdom. Now, why did Gorkha expand southward? The north of the Nepal was protected by Chinese, making it very difficult to expand in that direction. So the Gorkha moved southward towards India. Now, in 1801, the British annexed Gorakhpur, a region near Nepal. This led to the increasing contact and tensions between the British and the Gorkhas. So, this caused Anglo Nepalese war. The Gorkhas of the Nepal had expanded into Indian territories like Gorakhpur and Kumaon. This brought them into conflict with the British East India Company, and the British wanted to stop Nepalese against their expansion of land in India. So the Anglo-Nepalese War took place from 1814 to 1860, and the British defeated Nepal after a tough battle. The Nepali soldiers, especially Gorkhas, fought bravely. That had impressed even the Britishers. So, under the Treaty of Sugauli in 1816, Nepal was forced to sign a Treaty of Sugauli with the British, and under this treaty, Nepal had to give up large territory like Sikkim, Kumaon, Garhwal, and a part of Terai to the British. and the British stationed a resident, that is British representative in Kathmandu, reducing Nepal's independence. Even though Nepal lost, the British admired the Gorkha soldiers for their bravery, and the British started recruiting Gorkhas into their own army, forming the famous Gorkha regiment. All those things we have learnt over here, and this is how the Nepal had to accept a British resident in Kathmandu. Nepal gave up their Garhwal and Kumaon to the British, and they had lost its claim over Terai. Also, they had to withdraw from the Sikkim, and the British Empire expanded up to the Himalayas and strengthening their control over the North India. They got better trade routes through the mountain, and the British gained control over rich forests and rivers which held their economy. So this is all we have learned in this video, and the next video we shall discuss about the Anglo-Burmese relations, and which will be the last video for the chapter 5, and then we will continue the chapter 6 of spectrum. Till then, keep learning. Thank you.